jam in your universe.
Annyeonghaseyo friends, I'm Jonathan Miller and welcome back to Jonathan Miller Music, where we help each other become better artists. Today we are continuing our Girls' Generation Hype Week, and today we are reviewing Forever One by Girls' Generation. I'm completely talking off the cuff today. Normally I like to script my videos, but don't worry, I do have 4 pages of notes for this video. If you don't know me, I typically do genre deconstructions over on TikTok, and I've never really had a chance to kind of do one a little bit more in depth. So I'm going to be sharing my opinions, my thoughts on the whole album, a little bit of my thoughts about this comeback, some comparisons, a few critiques, as a very long time So-on, but also as a music producer and songwriter. Also, I want to acknowledge real quick that I'm going to be reviewing this album as a Girls' Generation album. If I reference anything in the past, I know it includes Jessica, but her not being on this album is not going to affect this review in any way. Also, I do acknowledge that Girls' Generation is my favorite K-pop group, so that will sway my thoughts and opinions, but let's get on with this review and genre deconstruction. So to me, first of all, this album is clearly for the fans and the members of Girls' Generation. However, listening through it, I do still think that if you are new to Girls' Generation or you want to know more about them, I feel you would still get something out of this record. When you're listening to music in a language you're not fluent in, it makes you have to listen to music in a different way. And while I do have a basis in Korean, I am not fluent in it. So for this particular album, I can't critique the lyrics exactly in the same way I could an English language album. That being said, Forever One is clearly the title track. As compared to the other 9 tracks, it stands out completely, but not in a way that made me disappointed with the other 9 songs. In fact, I think you could make the case that Lucky Like This could also be a potential title track for this record. Both songs feature catchy hooks, very strong choruses, and truthfully, both of them do call for a music video. Another thing that made me happy about this album is that it is not full of ballads. A lot of reunion type of comebacks are either one-off concerts, a reunion tour, or some kind of very meaningful ballad. Not that there's anything wrong with those types of things, it's just very refreshing to get a comeback album from a second generation group that did not choose either of those routes. Instead, they chose to make an album that fits right in line with the rest of their discography. R&B, dance pop, electropop, synth pop, disco, pop, rock, electronic, 90s R&B, a little bit of dubstep are all present on this record, especially disco and synth pop, which call back to Holiday Night and adds a layer of familiarity to this album. That being said, when I looked at translations of the lyrics, it's not all about time that has passed. There's sensuality, there's darkness, and a few other new sounds that we haven't heard from SNSD up until this point. Right away, the very first thing I noticed was that line distribution has clearly been altered. Everyone cuts through the mixes appropriately and effectively. It's not just all Taeyeon, Tiffany, and Seohyun getting the big notes, Hyuna and Sooyoung in the center, and some occasional lines for Sunny, Yuri, and Hyoyeon. Everyone gets their time to shine, and even in the group parts, the mixes have been changed so that one voice does not overpower the rest of them. That is very clearly the difference between Forever One and the rest of their discography. I think contract negotiations probably played a role in fixing this, or perhaps it was time away and everyone's been so successful that they wanted to rebalance. I would argue that Forever One is probably the first correctly balanced SNSD album, whereas in the past, we know exactly who's gonna sing what part before we even listen to the song. The tracks on Forever One offer a little bit of a surprise, especially if one of your favorite members didn't always get the time to shine, for example, Sunny and Hyoyeon. Hyoyeon gets some bigger and more belty notes, the same with Sunny, which is a more accurate representation of these girls who are trained vocalists. There are some typical SNSD sounds like with dance pop, of course, but it does feel a little bit more refreshed given the fact that more of the members have been involved in its writing and production. And Korean songwriter Kenzie blessed us with some more amazing music. Another moment on Forever One that stood out to me was the very last note on Paper Airplanes sung by Yoona. It very thoroughly completes the sonics of Forever One, but at the same time, the song doesn't feel necessarily like a goodbye, which I'll talk more about in a minute. Throughout the album, there are many references to previous SNSD work, but it's not distracting. The album is not heavily reliant on it. It offers harder-hitting songs like Villain, but those harder-hitting songs are always softened by pop touches that make songs like Villain approachable, even with a differently styled chorus. The song Forever One is very reminiscent of early 2010s dance pop, and I personally feel that the sample of Into the New World is very expertly placed in a blink and you'll miss it moment, which is done clearly for the fans, but factoring in that it is Kenzie, the opening chords of Into the New World also add to the bridge's construction in the song. Its mammoth-sized chorus invites the listener to succumb to the emotion of this comeback. It's a perfect title track for nostalgia, modernity, and honestly, objective construction. Even removing all of the emotion surrounding the song itself, it's still a very expertly crafted pop song. It gets your attention right away, it gets to the chorus very quickly, the chords it uses emphasize the emotions within the lyrics, and it has a few experimental touches just before the chorus begins. And its hook is so incredibly strong that you can't help but remember it right away. Pacing is still an important factor when constructing an album, even factoring in when people skip around through songs on Spotify, for example. This album really strongly flows together. Lucky Like That continues Forever One's energy, but also pulls back a little bit on it as well. It's a perfect dance pop summer anthem that, like I said before, I could definitely see a music video for or even a live stage in the future. 17 is a 90s R&B inspired track with good danceable synthesizers. On the surface, it is very obviously reminiscent of their ages right around Into the New World, but its tempo flows very nicely following Forever One and Lucky Like That. License plate GG805 was very funny on Villain, but the song itself offers a nice, dark, sultry touch that acts as a juxtaposition to the brightness we just heard on Forever One and Lucky Like That. I think Sooyoung and Tiffany deserve their songwriting kudos, and Tiffany did a great job on its production. There's small touches of dubstep on this album, almost a little more future-based, because the touches that it does have are not quite as abrasive as typical dubstep, but still utilize those rougher bass edges. You Better Run offers a great continuation of Run Devil Run. The production is strong, and not watered down by a typical pop chorus. It's very electronic and a little bit more experimental than the rest of Forever One. The album then takes a turn and feeds directly into the softer disco-inspired Closer, which allows the listener to not get distracted by its darker moments. Mood Lamp is arguably the most sultry song on the album, not just for its lyrics, but also for its vocals. It's a strong R&B pop song, which you can hear with its big harmony stacking in the chorus and inconsistent beats in the verses, and it serves as a reminder that the listener is hearing music from grown women and not young girls. Summer Night is another R&B pop song that leans a little bit more into the pop side of things to contrast what the listener just heard with Mood Lamp. Freedom brings in some familiarity from the previous songs with that retro nostalgia, in conjunction with a few modern touches. The chorus gives even more danceability, signature of Girls' Generation, and the disco influence comes out on that 4 on the floor beat. Paper Plane is a very strong album closer, with that soaring feel that is very typical of pop music. The B section feeds in emotional chords that, just like the album opener Forever One, make the listener have an emotional reaction to this song, whether they understand the language or not. It's my understanding that the lyrics are about pursuing your dreams, which feels very fitting for this exclamation point of a comeback. The album itself is very symbolic of the concept of a legacy, without making it the center point of the album, repeatedly driven home. Everything is very subtle, and extra care is taken to make sure that a fair balance is actually the center point of the album, underneath all of its layers. I would compare this album to Twice's more recent Japanese album, Celebrate, due to their similar emotions, situations surrounding them, overall sounds and vibes. Both albums favor dance pop and R&B, but where Twice's B-sides on Celebrate feel like typical K-pop B-sides that are strong and memorable, Forever One continues the motif of gratitude throughout the rest of the album. It's difficult for me to find a lot of critiques of Forever One because it drastically improves upon what's been established in Girls' Generation's discography already, and offers enough newness to act as a juxtaposition to all of its references to the past. To me, Forever One doesn't feel like a goodbye album, nor does it really feel like a reunion album, as we would know those things in the typical sense. It's just a mile marker, and rather than being a one-off single or a greatest hits of sorts, it's a full-length record continuing the story of Soña Shide. There's not a big sense of finality. The album is very self-assured without without being grossly overconfident. If I did have a few critiques of the record, it would be a little nitpicky, but I wish the album had one or two more additional songs. 32 minutes goes by rather quickly, but as a fan, I acknowledge that I could just be being selfish and wanting more. Another thing I would have liked to see on an album of this nature is a song that is entirely written by its members. This is where Twice recently excelled with their song Celebrate, in which all of the members share a writing credit. But that being said, Girls' Generation is still very much in on every single song, even if they didn't directly write it. Another potential critique is that the album clearly focuses on sounds that SNSD is already known for, meaning the dance pop sound of its title track is going to stick out amongst modern K-pop as compared to, let's say, aespa's Girls, or even Nayeon's recent solo debut with Pop. Nayeon's song specifically is dance pop, but it is done very much in the style of modern K-pop, whereas Forever One is definitely taking inspiration from the 2010s. Now for me, this isn't much of an issue because it's a sound I personally enjoy in music, but I could understand how younger K-pop fans, who might be more accustomed to the hits of, let's say, Twice, Blackpink, aespa, Luna, or ITZY, might not enjoy it the same way or just listen to it and think, kinda mid. It's not something that I really agree with, but I definitely see how the song might not resonate the same way. To me, Forever One does not feel like a goodbye. It feels like a test. Like, can we still do this? Do people still even want us? Are we too old? How would a Girls' Generation comeback even look like as women in their 30s when we're currently in K-pop's 4th generation? Can we even do this with 4 different agencies? Well, maybe let's see how this goes. The timing of it being the 15th anniversary is just convenient and gives appropriate reason to make a comeback. But my interpretation of the album is that it was made to serve as a reminder that SNSD is still here, even if it is in different capacities as time goes on. The heart and spirit of 소녀시대 remains even as generations come and go. It's important to note that Girls' Generation was under no obligation to actually make a comeback, but they clearly did this for the fans and for each other, which separates them from a lot of other K-pop groups. And while the album might be a celebration exclamation mark, if you listen through it, the door is still open for Girls' Generation to do some kind of activity in the future, barring that this comeback is even successful, which as of this recording, it's off to a great start. I personally feel if you don't know who Girls' Generation is, you're still gonna get something out of this album. In fact, I would argue that it's a great starting point to learn about Girls' Generation and work backwards so that you can see all of the history that went into this record and why it stands out so positively. I would put its umbrella genre as K-pop because that's the easiest label to put on it. I would put its subgenre as dance pop because that's the dominating feature on almost all of the songs. Its niche would probably be disco because given the current music market, which is favoring a lot of retro nostalgic sounds, this album does play in a little bit to the modern market. But I would put its micro niche as R&B because R&B offers a lot of sophistication, and this album does aim to remind people that these are grown women without directly throwing it in your face, giving us a K-pop album with influences of synth pop, disco, and electronic utilizing dance pop song structures in conjunction with R&B styled harmonies and beats, with a focus on its songwriting touches of career references and a motif of time-related imagery in order to highlight its balance of its vocalists while celebrating its fan and idol connection throughout the years. If you're on the lookout for some modern dance pop with some touches of that top 40 nostalgia, put it back on with Girls' Generation's Forever One.